Death is inevitable, yet many of us are scared of it. Anticipatory grief is the sorrow we feel from knowing a loved one is going to die even before it has happened. Being scared of our loved one is going to die or experiencing anticipatory grief is common. But why do we feel this way? First of all, it's important to know that it's normal to be afraid of losing a loved one. For one, there is an evolutionary benefit. People are drawn to each other as children are attached to their parents, and may release stress hormones when become separated. The evolutionary benefit for this is that this behavior is in the survival of human beings. We are scared of losing that connection to others, especially when we lose a loved one. We enjoy the company of others and acknowledge the impact they have on our lives. In addition, we may be afraid of having regrets after losing loved ones. When they are gone, we can't stop thinking what we should have done for or told them, and we realize in the acting that we won't have the chance to make up for these regrets anymore. This fear can also be linked to other fears, like the fear of being alone or not having a clear identity.
The process of grieving affects our brain as well. The neuroscience behind grief and our actions involves how stressed we may become after the death of a loved one, since our old livelihood and identity is affected because of the impact of this loved one. The ways our bodies react to this stress includes engaging in a fight or flight response because our sense of identity is being threatened. Also, when we experience stress, we may go through several stages as a reaction to this. The first phase is the alarm reaction. In this stage, the pituitary gland produces the hormone ACTH. Eventually, this hormone gets to the adrenal gland, in which it stimulates the production of the stress hormone, cortisol. This means that the longer we feel grief, the longer the ACTH produces a lot of stress hormones, which means we're getting more and more stressed. With cortisol, we may experience a faster heart rate and more blood flowing to our muscles. However, too much cortisol production is harmful to not only our mental health but also physical health, like how it can negatively affect the immune system. Overall, grief affects many parts of the brain, like the amygdala, which is responsible for the intensity of our emotions, and our perception of things like threats. The amygdala, hippocampus, and prefrontal lobes light up when we reflect upon stories and memories of loved ones. Grief can also affect other parts of the brain, such as the cerebellum and the thalamus. Much of what is happening to our brain and the hormones it regulates and releases causes many physical health problems associated with grieving. For example, one can experience a loss of appetite because of the effects of cortisol. In addition, cortisol can contribute to sensations of dizziness, difficulty concentrating, and nausea.
Thus, the next question to consider is how should one cope with the death of a loved one? Surprisingly, when coping with the death of a loved one, most people respond in a resilient way. They experience only temporary distress and follow an adaptive course of adjustment. After several months, they begin to recover baseline levels of function and return to a normal life. To speed up recovery, some advice should be followed. Acceptance of the normality of your feelings helps you understand that your grief is different from others. Don't put deadlines to get yourself perfectly back together, nor should you compare your grief to others because you are different from them. Know that you have your own circumstances and your own reasons for grieving. However, this doesn't mean you shouldn't communicate with others. You should talk about the loss with close friends and family to understand your own feelings and remember the person you lost. Don't forget to keep yourself healthy by exercising, sleeping, exploring hobbies, and maintaining a healthy diet. Meditation for mindfulness and journaling for self-expression are also options. It's important to learn these techniques because they can not only help your physical and emotional health, but also allow you to console others when they're coping with these emotions. When you see others coping with the death of a loved one, you can apply these techniques above. You can also be a silent listener to allow them to express their feelings. You can support them by acknowledging the situation and allowing them to retell their stories, which may help lessen their pains.
However, 10 to 15% of the bereaved struggle to adapt their loss over a period of many months or years. If left untreated, this grief can lead to increased vulnerability to functional impairment, high blood pressure, cardiac events, substance abuse, and suicidal ideation over the long term. If you find yourself down this spiral, you should make the conscious decision to seek therapy. One option is to opt for grief therapy rather than basic psychotherapy. According to a study done by Robert A. Niemeyer and Joseph M. Currier, results suggest that grief therapy can be helpful to people combating a range of losses by reducing the many forms of distress in the near and long-term aftermath of grief. This is only for people assessed as struggling with substantial clinical distress in the first place, however. Aforementioned, this study also found that others with less oppressive and sustained symptoms tend to respond resiliently even in the absence of intervention, which means that these grieving people can achieve a lot without professional assistance. Other effective therapies use written or oral procedures to promote adaptation to the story of loss and to promote more constructive thinking, both of which have outperformed certain control conditions. In these studies, common components include 1. Selecting grievers who display intense and prolonged separation distress in the aftermath of loss. 2. Repeatedly retelling the circumstances of the death with associated feelings and reactions, which is paired with prompts to help the person change its perspective in a healing manner. 3. Guiding an encounter with the memory of a loved one by using a symbolic monologue, dialogue with the deceased, or drafting letters to them. And 4. Promoting restoration-oriented coping, like addressing current relationships and responsibilities and focusing on new goals. Grief therapy research provides encouragement that easing traumatic imagery associated with the loss, countering fatalistic thinking and hopelessness, and addressing practical readjustments in life can all play a role in promoting adaptation. However, they leave room for exploration of factors that could contribute to the further refinement of grief theory and therapy. There are methods being studied in grief therapy like controlled grief therapy or CGT. CGT believes that to cope with loss, it's important to oscillate between adapting to the loss and restoration of contact with a changed world. Adaptation includes expressing and exploring the grief and reconnecting with the memory of a loved one. Restoration includes re-engaging relationships and experimenting with new life roles. You'll notice that this is similar to the personal advice we gave. To fulfill CGT's tasks, it has a series of procedures. These range from revisiting the story of the loss and its most painful aspects to holding facilitated conversations with the image of the loved one to creating opportunities to reorganize future goals. Psychologists Shear, Frank, Houch, and Reynolds in 2005 found that such therapy produces substantial changes across 16 weeks of treatment for over half of those with debilitating grief. This is roughly twice the rate of improvement for similar patients randomly assigned to a more general form of psychotherapy. For other resources that you may utilize to help with your grieving, check out the list of resources we have included in the description box of the video. Curious to learn more about psychology from a team of curious students? Check out our other videos on our channel to get all of your psychology-related questions answered.